Okay, so good afternoon. My name is Anton. I'm Anton Günther from Global Freight Services. I'm the managing director of a local freight forwarding company. I've been in logistics for 26 years, and it's a really exciting world of international trade, international travel at times, but also being able to help customers transport their goods from around the world. So, what I thought I'd like to do is to introduce my sector and introduce what we actually do. So, to give you a sort of overview of the history of freight forwarding, the first freight forwarder in the world was obviously Adam and Eve. And when I say Adam and Eve, it's when Eve hand delivered an apple to Adam. This was the start of people hand delivering and the logistics world. In 3500 BC, before Christ, obviously the wheel was invented, and this led to road transport, carriages, things like that, people drawing goods from one side to the other. And then in 3100 BC, the evolution of the sailing vessel. So not only could people now transport goods on land, but they now open up the frontiers of other countries. A lot later, 1804 AD, the steam engine was invented. When I say it was invented, obviously this opened up transport via rail. So countries, for example, like Russia, like Australia, like the USA, which has vast quantities of land mass, were now able to transport goods at a very cheap rate from one part of the world to the other. And then finally, to close off all of the transport avenues, in 1903, the aeroplane was invented, and this led to obviously more and more people being able to fly from one destination to another. And also then obviously whilst they're flying, they're obviously taking freight, post in particular, etc. So a couple of other significant dates. And the reason I sort of go through the history of freight forwarding is because we're an unknown quantity in terms of Korea. And it's really important to understand where the industry has come from, where it is at presently, and where it's going in the future. So as you can see there on 1st century AD, a network of roads across the road, which meant that obviously road transport. Interestingly, in 1635, Charles I started getting payment for messengers carrying messages, i.e. Royal Mail. Going further down the line, the first planes carrying passengers between England and Paris was 1919. And then obviously a very big fundamental change in transport from the UK to Europe was the 1994 when the Channel Tunnel actually opened. This guy here is a guy called Malcolm McLaren, or Malcolm McLean even. When you're sat in your motor car driving up and down the motorways, you'll very often see big metal containers, and these are what are called sea containers. Well, Malcolm McLean is the guy who actually invented it. In 1956, he patented the shipping container. And then it wasn't until the 1970s when the actual US Navy implemented taking arms, ammunition, equipment, etc., on their ships via sea containers. When the general public sort of cottoned onto it, obviously we now get into a scenario where shipping containers are probably one of the most identifiable tools of a freight forwarder. Very briefly, who's Global Freight? We've been trading here in Telford for the past 24 years. We're a local Shropshire-based company. We have about 100. We belong to the Air Ocean Network, which gives us a agent reach of about 160 agents. And what that means worldwide is that we can transact and do business in countries where we don't have offices ourselves. Obviously, as a small company based in Telford or in Shropshire, we're very pleased to say that up until now, we've shipped to about 132 countries in the world. If you bear in mind that there's 192 countries in the world, we've only got about 32 more countries to ship, and then we can say we've shipped to every single country in the world. What do? Well, we transact by import, we transact exports. Imports obviously is the bringing in of goods from other countries. Exports is the taking of goods and services from the UK outwards. And cross-trade is where we transact, where the goods don't actually come into the UK. That being something like a shipment from South Africa to the US. What products and services do we offer? Well, we do sea freight, we do air freight. So sea freight, we'll discuss all of these in a little bit detail in a minute, but sea freight, we do air freight, road freight, taking goods by lorry. We do rail where applicable. For those people who want to ship and are scared of their goods being damaged, we offer insurance. When we talk about small freight, if you remember correctly, right in the beginning, Adam and Eve started doing hand deliveries. Well, we can do courier. Pick and pack, we currently have 2 warehouses here in Telford, which has products in, and customers ask us to pick the product out of the warehouse, put it onto a vehicle and transport it to their customer's destination. My personal favorite is personal effects. That's where people are moving from, let's say, the UK to Australia, and we helping to move their personal effects or their household goods from there to Australia, assisting them with everything that they require, including customs clearance, etc. And then we do sell a small amount of packing materials. We're coming on to sea freight. Sea freight is probably the largest amount of freight, or the biggest amount of freight is moved by sea. This is just a small little ship that was sailing in Kenya, taking freight from the Kenyan port to a small island. But then we look at the largest ship, which is the HMM Algeciras, which holds 23,964 containers. So if you came into our industry, one of those containers you could be controlling. So it really is, from a sea point of view, or from a freight point of view, sea freight is really exciting, because we not only ship on massive ships, but we also do use little ships to transport goods as well. And that's we do stuff from here to Portugal by sea. We do it from here to Australia, from here to the US. So the world has really opened up with the invention of the ship, but more importantly, with the invention of larger ships like the HMM Algeciras, it means that we can ship more freight around the world. A couple of interesting facts about sea freight. There's about 25 million containers crossing the world at any one time. So if we just drop back to the HMM Algeciras, if you look at those colored boxes on top of that, that's what we call a shipping container. And if you look at that figure, there's 23 million of those containers in the world, which means that this ship carries 23,000. So that's about, I think is it 1% of the world's total amount of containers will be shipped on that one ship, if my maths is right. 95% of the world's cargo moves by sea. As I said, the largest amount or the largest ship is the HMS Algeciras, and there's about 1.5 million seafarers that are employed globally within the shipping industry. So although a freight forwarder like myself is clearly based in the UK or in Telford, you can also get involved in the logistics industry by going to become a merchant seaman, i.e. working on the container vessels. You can captain it once you've obviously got your qualifications. So logistics has such a broad brush of opportunity in terms of employment. Road freight is exactly what it says. It's the transportation of goods via road, and that can be via bicycle, as in this instance, or indeed it can be by big articulated lorries like you see on the motorways. With regards to road freight, it's a massive industry in the UK. You just have to drive along the motorways to be able to see the amount of articulated lorries traveling up and down the motorways. But from our point of view, well, not from our point of view, but from the UK's point of view, road freight is worth £42 billion a year. The Road Haulage Association, of which we're a member, has a large amount of vehicles that they have in their, or that they look after. You can see there are 100,000. 20 million tons of freight passed through the Eurotunnel in 2014. So you can see why in 1994, when the Eurotunnel actually opened, why it was such significant improvement to the logistics infrastructure for the UK. This is the largest sector of transport in the UK. We tend to shy away from rail freight. Obviously, we're too small to ship containers by sea from London up to Scotland. So we are very reliant on the road freight industry. The next method of transport is air freight. Air freight is probably one of the most expensive methods of transportation. As you can imagine, currently with the lack of flights around the world, there's a lack of aeroplanes taking freight, which means that there's a lack of space. This drives the price of air freight up. 1/3 of the world's airports are in the USA, so you can imagine how big that country is. Obviously, the USA, they would ordinarily use air freight for even transporting their own goods from one part of the USA to the other. In terms of air freight, it's really important to realize that the UK will do trade with countries that has a direct link. People are more likely to do trade with the UK if there is a direct flight, because it's easier to get to those places. And again, we'll come back to how we as a company and how you as a potential new employee or someone working for a logistics company, how exciting that could be to work in the air freight industry. And then finally, we've got rail freight. Rail freight is used in countries, for example, where large land mass, Canada, USA, Russia. We also use it extensively in places like Brazil, where there's a rainforest. The trains can get through the forest of these train lines. Australia, etc. In the UK, it's very underutilized. We could certainly free up road space if we use the rail freight industry a lot more, but unfortunately, infrastructure currently doesn't allow that. I think it's important to realize that when you work for a freight company like Global Freight Services, you'll have the ability to transact in each one of those four transport methods. And that's what makes our job really exciting, because it's not only taking little boxes or big boxes or containers, but it's dealing with things like wood, it's dealing with things like grain or wheat. So every day in our industry is definitely different. When we look at the freight industry, we need to realize that everything that is purchased, anything that is moved, will be touched by someone in the logistics industry, a freight forwarder. Here, for example, these are tugs or ferries, in fact, that were transported from the USA over to Greece. Another, that's a massive oil rig which is being transported from Houston in Texas up to the North Sea. There's another picture of the ferry. And then in our industry, we say nothing is too small. A typical day in the freight industry is anything from arriving at 8 o'clock in the morning to talk to China in the morning, to leaving at 6 o'clock in the evening to talk to the USA. Because obviously with time scales and time differences, you are dealing with different cultures, you're dealing with different time zones. For me, it's really exciting to be working in the logistics industry. It's a simple industry to get into. The only warning I would give you that if you do get into the freight industry, you'll struggle to get out of it because it's so addictive. It can be really stressful at times. I do travel quite a bit with my job in terms of going to meet agents, going to meet customers, etc. So if it is an industry that you really want to get involved in, then by all means, Oliver, if you want to pass on their details or pass on any questions that they may have to myself on how to get into it in more specific details in what they want to get into, then certainly I'm more than happy to talk to any group of school leavers. This slide indicates the magnitude or what we do as freight forwarders. This was the returning customs declaration for moon rock or moon dust from the actual moon. And when it came into the US, i.e. into Hawaii, because they say it landed in Honolulu airport, but obviously landed in the sea, they had to do a customs declaration. And customs declaration is what we do on a daily basis. So whilst I can't say that we've brought moon rock in from the moon, we have brought a number of strange things and shipped a number of strange things. I think for me, the strangest thing that I've had to deal with was human remains, which was part of a repatriation of someone's will. The person unfortunately passed away in the UK, but wanted her ashes returning to Slovenia, and we were able to assist with getting her ashes back to Slovenia.